the Appalachian Mountains are haunted. If this is the first video that you were ever watching about the Appalachian Mountains, you are about to go down the biggest rabbit hole ever. And if you are on the side of Appalachian TikTok, then keep listening because I have some things to say. First of all, don't come for my pronunciation. I am in the South and it's pronounced differently depending on where you are on the map. Just a little backstory. My dad grew up in South Carolina. His parents' house was technically in the Appalachian Mountains, and there was always weird stuff that happened at this house, and it wasn't until my 20s that I put the two and two together. One time I was scrolling on my phone late at night on TikTok, and I came across this video of a girl and her friend who had broken down on the side of the road. Everything turned out to be okay, but they were like, thank goodness we knew the rules of the Appalachian Mountains. And I went, the rules of the Appalachian Mountains? And that's what started my TikTok spiral. So when my dad moved into this house that his parents, my grandparents, built, there were some really weird things that happened. The stories that I'm about to tell you are stories that have been passed down for years. We always knew about these stories, and as kids, we slept in this house at night, and it was just always a little eerie. The first night that the house was built and people could be inside of it, my grandfather was by himself and he heard the phone ring. They had their landline put in. I don't know what it looked like back in those times, but he picks up the phone and he's talking to whoever's on the other end, and he feels a hand pressed down on his shoulder. Obviously, he turns around and he's freaked out because there's nobody behind him. So that's the first story in this house that is a little bit eerie. Take off my earrings really quick. So then the rest of the family eventually finally moves in now that it's complete. My dad, his two brothers, his sister, my grandmother, everybody. So then the weird footsteps start happening. So the house is like a 2-level. It's not like a 2-story, but it's like a main level, and then it has like a basement with not a basement, it has windows and everything, but that's where all the kids sleep. So there's this long hallway across that gets to the master bedroom where they are, and then underneath where all the kids are. My dad has a couple of his friends over. He's like a little kid, and they're down in the basement, where all the bedrooms are, and they hear this heavy walking across the hallway, with heavy boots. And at first they're like, are these people that have been working on the house, or who's here? Basically, they were like, what the heck? And then they walk upstairs and it's obviously nobody. And I remember my dad actually called, I don't know why his parents were out that night, but he called his dad, my grandpa, to see if they could come back and come back early because they were so freaked out. So that's the kids hearing things, but then everyone starts hearing the same heavy walking down the hallway at different times of the week, month. Everyone experiences this heavy walking across the floor, even when they know that they're at the house alone and there's no one upstairs. One time my dad is there by himself again, and this is common because his older siblings are at least 10 years older, so they're dating and stuff. So he hears rustling downstairs, moving around with papers and all this kind of stuff, and he's like, oh, my brother is going to play a prank on me, he's gonna sneak up on me. So he walks towards the bedroom, ready to be ha, gotcha. And as he approaches the room that he hears it from, which I guess was his bedroom, it stops. And he walks into the bedroom and there's no one in there. My grandmother actually said that there was one time when she heard this heavy walking across the floor, like I explained, and she was by herself and she was so scared that she walked up the stairs with a baseball bat. So not only are the kids hearing this, the adults are hearing this too. So these are the stories that I grew up hearing, and so when I go down this TikTok rabbit hole and I hear about the rules of the Appalachian Mountains, I look them up and I'm like, what? So let me see if I can get them all correctly, and y'all can, fact check me, and if I'm missing or saying them wrong, then please tell me. So the rules were, don't whistle in the woods. If you hear something, no you didn't. If you hear something close to you, it's far away. If you hear something far away, then it's actually closer to you. And always to stay on the marked trail, never leave the marked trail, and don't look too deep into the woods because you might not like what you see. I'm someone that enjoys looking into these kinds of things, and obviously you can tell by the kind of content that I produce that I enjoy kind of the weird side of the world and the internet. And so I just go down Appalachian Talk and I'm just I'm thinking about these stories that I've grown up hearing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the woods are haunted. Obviously, And I like to know like the history of things. Like these kind of superstitions and rules and things they weren't taken lightly. Like way back, you know, in the 1800s, 1700s, these were things that people believed and they took very seriously. These were real things that people experienced. They held them sacred. And also, as beautiful and as amazing as these mountains are, when you're there at night, there's like a different vibe that like I can't really put my finger on. It's just there's just like this, the darkness is just so thick. Like it's a very creepy place. So if this is your first time hearing about the Appalachian Mountains being haunted, what are the things that people see? What are the things that people experience? Okay, we're gonna go into that next. People claim that, you know, people take mimics. That's another big thing that people experience in the Appalachian Mountains, where they hear their name being called by a voice that they recognize, but that person is at home. They see someone that they recognize, but it's not that person because that person's not even in that city. That's very common. Cryptids like Bigfoot, Mothman, and then just like beastly like creatures. Like when I did my research, there's a lot of trail cam footages of these people, entities, I guess. I mean, these stories are years and years and years and years of people's superstitions and experiences. So like I almost feel like it's kind of like small-minded of me to just be like, nope, none of it exists. So we are in the Appalachian Mountains this weekend, and every time I come up here, I love the mountains for what they are, but then when we're here at night, there's just like a different vibe and it just feels so eerie. And so I was like, well, I definitely have to come on and talk about it. I can't really talk and do mascara, so just a quick mascara break. Went and got my outfit on. Y'all, look at this romper. It's so cute. Okay, we're in the Appalachian Mountains this weekend, and I just can't help but think about all the stories and the Appalachian talk, and I want to know your thoughts, and I'll let you know if anything weird happens while we're here. Not like anything will, but I don't know how I went 28 years without knowing any of this, but you never know. You know, you learn things new every single day. Take this out of my hair. So y'all leave me your thoughts. I want to know your stories. I want to know your thoughts and opinions on this topic. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Okay, so I was not planning on doing another story time tonight because I'm still trying to get over being sick, and my voice is just kind of giving Miley Cyrus's hit cousin, but we're gonna do it anyway because I got to talking with my mom tonight, and she shared some stories. She sent me videos, and she shared some stories and reminded me of some things that happened when I was growing up in Tennessee. And the last two stories in particular that she, you know, told me, one I'm gonna have to save for another day, because just to be honest, it like put a pit in my stomach in the same way that like the story that I first shared, my very first spooky story, where I told y'all about how my boyfriend saw me sitting on the bed, but it wasn't me, it was another thing like that looked like me. So it's like that kind of vibe, and it makes me feel sick at my stomach. Because these are not just spooky stories, these are real things. Like, these are things that have happened in my life. So I'm going to save that one for maybe another day this week. But the one I'm sharing tonight is equally as freaky, but just in a different type of way. Okay, now this story happened when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I have to give you guys some preface on this, because if I don't, you're going to be like, what the hell, Haley? Like, you need to understand. So the property that I grew up at in Tennessee, my mama and papa had lived on that property for years until my papa passed away. When my papa passed away, my mama, she stayed there for a while, but eventually sold the house. When she sold the house, my family bought it, my mom and my dad, and then we moved in there. Now, before my mama moved out of that place, when my papa passed away, she was insistent on having my papa buried on that property. She wanted him close. She was just, that was her way of coping with that grief. And it was a big property. They owned it. She had him initially buried on the edge of the wood line in the backyard, like up close to where my papa's woodshed was. And we eventually, after we moved in, had him move to like a cemetery and everything. My mama was like okay with that, so we did. But when we first moved in there, my papa was still buried there. So that's the preface, because this story took place at my papa's grave at my house in Tennessee. So as I said, I'm 5 or 6 years old, and I remember this. So on this day, I'm outside, and I had picked some wildflowers for my papa's grave. I would always pick him wildflowers and take them to his grave and sing him a song, and that's what I was doing this day. My mom was doing dishes, and she was watching me out the kitchen window. Out the kitchen window, you see the backyard all the way up to the wood line where my papa's buried. So she's watching me. It's a sad thing. Like I'm grieving, my papa, and so as she is standing there, it's kind of just like this little bittersweet thing. She all of a sudden gets a really eerie, icky vibe, like something is wrong. And at the same time, now I'll tell you her perspective, and then I will backtrack and tell you mine, because they were synchronized experiences, even though we are an entire yard apart, okay? And I'm really young. So she gets this super creepy feeling, and at the same time, she watches me stand up. Now, she has the kitchen window open, so she can hear to an extent, and she hears me scream really loud. And I had, like, when I first stood up, I was like, I turned around and started looking up in the woods, and I didn't see what she saw somehow, but so I scream, and as I scream, she just knows. She said, Haley, run. So I start hightailing it down to the house. I run my little ass all the way to the front yard. I was not messing around. So to backtrack and kind of tell you what I experienced, okay? And I'm going to tell you what my mom saw. Super freaking creepy. I have no idea what it was. So I just remember I'm literally on my hands and knees by his grave. I have the flowers by his grave. All of a sudden, I felt this, I don't know, it was like a primal kind of fear, like when your adrenaline kicks in, kind of primal fear. Don't know why. I thought that I heard like leaves rustling or something. That's so common. I lived in the middle of the mountains. Leaves rustling normally wouldn't scare me, but I knew something was wrong. I felt like something was there, or like I was being watched or something. I don't know how to explain it. I just know that it scared me really bad. When I turned around and looked into the woodline, I didn't see anything. I was just frozen. I was like paralyzed for a minute. Didn't see anything. And then I hear my mom yell, Haley, run, and that's when I take off. Now my mom, after she said, Haley, run, so when my mom screams, Haley, run, she looks up. There's a huge oak tree in the edge of the woods right by the grave and my papa's woodshed. She sees she says like a figure, like a human figure, because we don't know if it was actually a man. I don't think that men are 7 feet tall very often. She said that it was in dark clothing, and she could clear as day make out an arm, and from the shoulders down, the whole body, like just like you're seeing me, like a whole body. Doesn't make sense why she could not see facial features, but she could not. The sun's out, like she can see the skin, the dark clothing, and she said that this thing had some sort of a staff or a pole, and she said it was like thick in diameter. It's not like a fishing pole. It's like, imagine like a piece of like PVC pipe or some shit. I don't know what else. So she said that it was like a silver color, glistening in the sun even, and it had it in its hand, like, like standing there like freaking Gandalf, I don't know, about 7 foot tall, and it like peers out from behind this oak tree. And so she thinks there is some sort of a man up there, and that he is like trying to hurt me or kidnap me or break into my papa's woodshed. Now, it's super creepy to have anybody on your property, but a property that remote, that's even scarier, because why are you all the way back there? And so she runs out onto the back porch. When she gets onto the back porch, she doesn't see it. And so she is looking, she's too scared to run up there. She's looking around, and then she starts thinking, like, this was so real. What if, you know, there's this fishing pond that's like way back in the woods and stuff. What if, you know, my dad, he was at this pond. What if his truck broke down and he like walked back through the woods or something like that, because it was quicker than taking the road. And so right about that time, my dad pulls in the driveway in his truck. Now, she screams for him, and she said, "Jeff, there's somebody in the woods up here." So my dad takes off in that little pickup truck through the yard all the way up to the wood line. He gets up there, he jumps out, he's running around through the woods, looking in the shed, like there's nobody. There is not a trace of anybody. Now, Mom said she saw this thing, this man, whatever, go back behind this big oak tree. He never came out from behind that oak tree. There is no way he could have walked away or like without her seeing. You know what I mean? So we still don't know what it was. We never found out. So yeah, that's the story. I don't know what to make of it. I have very clear memories of it. One of my earlier childhood memories, and my mom, you know, obviously remembers it. There were quite a few things that happened at that house in Tennessee, and we will have to share more about that house at a later time.
As many of you know, I grew up in deep Appalachia. I now live in Atlanta, Georgia, and there are times where I'll tell my friends stories from what happened to me when I lived out there, and they're like, "What?" I already posted about my UFO story last year, and that video got to like 3 million views. But today, I'm going to tell you guys the story of when I was a kid and I encountered a skinwalker, or at least what I thought was a skinwalker. I hate long intros, so I'm just going to get into the story. The place I lived was a place called Jasper, Georgia. It's right next to LJ. And I lived in the place where the show Squidbillies was based on, and we have a Squidbillies shrine in our town center. I had a friend that I would stay with pretty often, and her family owned a 300-acre farm. And when I say family, it's just her and her mom who live there. And so they have like all these farm animals, and they have different parts of their land that you have to walk through trails in the woods to get through. Like, in order to get to one barn, you have to walk through the woods for like 10 minutes just to get there. So there was one day that I was sleeping over there, and we had been home alone all day. I was probably in 3rd grade when this happened. Some of you might ask why me and my friend were just like 2 3rd graders alone on this farm. And it was because my parents were getting a divorce, and so I needed a place to go, so I pretty much lived with this girl at the time. But back to the story. So my friend's mom was on the way home, but I guess there was like a lot of traffic, or she was running late or something. So she called my friend and she asked her if we could like go down to one of the barns and feed the horses before we went to bed. So at this point in time, it was probably like 8 o'clock. The sun was going down. It was about to be nighttime. You could still see the sun and the light when you're in the open field, but in the woods, it was like pretty dark. Like there was no sunlight. So my friend and I started walking through the pasture to the woods, and she had a flashlight with her. We got to the woods, she turned the flashlight on, and we started walking. We were walking for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes through these woods, so we're about halfway through the trail, and we're just talking about some shit and laughing. And then all of a sudden, my friend just stops talking, and like I was kind of just like looking at her, like as we were speaking. I wasn't really looking in front of me. And then she just like drops the flashlight, and starts sprinting in the opposite direction, like back to the house. And so I was like, "You okay, Rebecca?" And because that was her name. And I turn and I see her sprinting, and the flashlight was just like on the floor in front of me. And I was like, "What the fuck?" So I turn back in front of me, and I just see like maybe like 10 feet away this gigantic like white figure. And I didn't look at it for long, but just like the sheer height of this thing, whatever the fuck it was, scared me so badly that I looked at it and immediately was like fight or flight mode. Like, I felt danger. So right when I looked at it, I turned the other way and fucking booked it. I was running faster than I'd ever ran before. So fast that I passed my friend, and I was like running and pissing my pants at the same time. Like, that's how fucking scary it was. And so I ran all the way back to her house, and in my brain I was like, what is the one place I can hide right now where no one will find me? And the only thing I could think of was like, I just ran to the laundry room and I got in the dryer. And so I was just sitting in the dryer, and it was like one of those old school dryers. It wasn't like plastic clear cover, so it was just like a white door that closes it from the front. And so I was just in there. I was like curled up in a ball, and I waited like, I don't know, what seemed like 15-20 minutes. I was just in there covered in piss, and eventually I thought that whatever the fuck was in the woods had like killed my friend. And so I was just crying, and like I was freaking out, but I was also terrified and didn't want to die. So I was just sitting in there. And then eventually my friend walks through the door, and I can tell that she's crying and she's like hyperventilating. She's like like I hear that. And so I open the dryer, and she's like scared when I open it, obviously. And I was just like also crying, and we hug each other, and I was like, "Where did you go?" And so she told me that she had ran and she got into like this trailer that was kind of near the house, because it was the only place she could think of to hide. And so we were both hiding, and I guess she just like mustered up the courage to run to the main house. And so we were both just like trying to explain what we saw and like put together whatever the fuck that was. And this was like 2008, maybe 2009. So I think I was like 12 or something when this happened, but this was way before like creepypasta or like any of these stories were like even around. So we couldn't even put a name to like what the fuck we saw out there. And so when her mom finally got home, we tried to explain what just happened, and she just like dismissed us, and she was like, "You girls are just like overreacting. You guys saw a bear or like a deer or something," which is still terrifying if we saw a bear, but it definitely was not a bear, because this thing was like pure white. And in the dark, it's like the only thing you can really see is like, if there's someone standing in front of you with a white t-shirt, like you're gonna see that. But this thing was completely white, and that's all I remember is just like this gigantic, like 7 or 8 foot tall thing just like standing right in front of me, staring at me. And so I'm not friends with this girl anymore. I haven't talked to her in probably like 15 years. But I just remember that story, and I remember being so scared that I pissed myself. And the only thing I could think of that being is like a skinwalker. So maybe that is a skinwalker. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I've never told that on here, so I hope you guys were entertained and enjoyed it, and maybe got scared. But anyways, later this week I'm going to post another story about the Appalachian feral people, because I think I also had an experience with that when I was younger. There was a lot of weird shit that happened. But yeah, thank you guys.
Okay, creepy story time. This is a story about a guy named Danny who decides to rent a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. And if you know anything about the Appalachian Mountains, you know where this is going. So Danny finds a cabin online. It's cheap, but it's described as remote and super peaceful, and that's exactly what he wanted. So obviously makes his trip to the mountains. And if you've been to the mountains, you know that the roads they can be really scary. They're super narrow. You're going up, 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 like for miles and miles. You can't see around a lot of the turns because, you know, the trees and just the edge of the mountain and it being so winding. It was a creepy ride, he said, but when he got there, the cabin was what was described. It was a nice little cabin right on the edge of the ridge, and it looked kind of weathered, but still it was like nice and cozy. It had like a single bedroom, a wood burning stove, and the porch looked right over the valley. So it was everything he wanted, and he was happy with it. Now, the first night was super peaceful. He said he even slept with the window open because the mountain breeze just felt really nice. You could hear the crickets and stuff in the woods. It was super peaceful. But the second night is where things started to get really weird. So first, he heard slow but deliberate footsteps on the porch, which was like right outside the window. And that startled him. And then he hears tapping on the window, and that really startled him. So he grabs his phone and he checks the time, and it's exactly 3:12 a.m. So he's really creeped out, but obviously he's gonna go see what the tapping is, because don't they always? So there's like a little part in the curtain where he can like kind of peek through a little bit. So he peeks out there and he sees a tall, like abnormally thin figure. And so he opens the curtains completely. Why, I don't know. But he opens the curtains and he sees it's a woman, but like she looks not right. She's super thin, pale, barefoot. She's wearing like a nightgown, and she has long dark hair that covers part of her face, kind of like my creepy doll back there. And he asked her, like, do you need help? He said she didn't say anything. She just stood there, and like her head was like tilted slightly. Oh, he also did say that her eyes were super dark and empty, so that's creepy. But then he was like, are you lost? Like, he's trying to get her to answer, and she's not saying anything. And then all of a sudden she just kind of like smiles just a little bit, and she's like, let me in. This really freaked him out, and then her smile got way wider, like abnormally wide, and he went to grab a flashlight. So he rushes to grab a flashlight, and when he turns to shine it towards her, she's gone. So the next morning, he just gets up and he hikes down the mountain like a mile, and there's like this little mountain general store, and the clerk in there looks at him and he's like, you look like shit. And he's like, yeah, I didn't sleep very well last night. There was a weird woman that showed up to my cabin, and she was super pale with dark hair, and, you know, he described her or whatever. And the clerk was like, where are you staying? And he was like, the cabin is called Black Hollow Cabin. You know, they name all their cabins and stuff. And he was like, that's where you're staying? And Danny was like, yeah, why? And he was like, do you know who that is? Is someone like missing or something? And the clerk was like, people have been seeing that woman for about 50 years. And the people that see her tend to go missing. So Danny was like, what am I supposed to do? He said, do not talk to her and absolutely do not let her in. So that night, Danny is freaked out, and so he has all the lights on, and he's got all the windows and doors completely locked, and he just sits on the couch all night with his like hunting utensil in his lap. Sorry, I don't know what I can say on here. And 3:12 a.m. here come the footsteps on the porch, and then here come the taps. But this time, she says his name. He hears, Danny. So Danny just ignores her like he's told, and she says, Danny, let me in. And he just keeps ignoring her literally all night long. And then he hears the footsteps leave the porch. So the next morning, he packs his stuff and he leaves, but he stops by that store, and all the clerk says to him is, she'll find someone else.
This is a story time of the scariest thing that has happened to me as someone who has grown up in the Appalachian Mountains. I'd like to start off by saying I'm not scared of where I live. Like, I have experienced some weird things in my lifetime, but I feel like a lot of people do experience weird things in their life. Maybe they don't, and it's just because I live here, but I have experienced some creepy things. The creepiest time I can remember is probably this one time that I was walking back from this oyster festival with my parents and my whole family, and we were like standing kind of on this hill, like in the parking lot overlooking this cow field and like a wooded area, and I heard like screaming. Like, when I tell you, it sounded like exactly like a man screaming. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I was terrified. I turned to my dad and I was like, do you hear that? And he doesn't get creeped out easily, and neither does my mom really, and they just like looked at each other. And I remember my mom was like, David, like, what is that? And it was like repeated screaming, like it was like, help, help, help. Like, it was like really weird. And it did, like, there's a lot of animals around here that make like noises. It sounded like exactly like a human. Like, I had no doubt in my mind that was a man screaming for help. And like the people walking back to the cars from the oyster festival were listening like to the screams. They were like, what is that? And so my dad, he like started yelling off into the distance. He was like, hello, like, are you okay? And we just like sat there for a while, and like there was no response. And then he yelled again for them, no response. And eventually like they just stopped screaming. After the screaming stopped, I was like, there's no way this just happened. I'm getting in the car. So I ran to the car with my sister, and we got in the car, and we were just like, what was that? Like, that sounded like a human. And I just remember my sister like genuinely freaking out. She was like, Mom, Dad, like, that was a human screaming. And they were like, of course, like, no, like, but why would they thought they were weirded out too. But I was like, should we call 911? And they're like, no, like, we shouldn't. He would have yelled back if, like, that's the weird thing. Like, if it was a human, why was he not yelling back at us? Like, yes, help me, you know? And at that point, I was just like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm not sticking around for anything else. I'm scared. So I was like, I'm leaving. We drove away and we went home, and nothing happened after that. And overall, like, I'm not scared of these mountains. I've grown up camping in them, like hiking in them. I'm not scared, but I have experienced some weird things. Yeah, anyways, let me know if you want any more stories.
It's Appalachia Spooky Story Time, y'all, and this story is very different than my others, which is exactly why I chose it, and I want to know what you all think about it. This story comes from one of my followers named Katie. It is pretty terrifying. If you are scared easily and you're watching this at night, I would just save it and wait until the morning. Katie said she grew up in the Midwest, but when she was in 7th grade, her family moved to Western North Carolina. It was her dad, her mom, her sister, and her. Katie said that they moved into this very old farmhouse, and even though it was an older farmhouse, it was quite big. And she said that they had a lot of woods back on the property. There was some field areas where there was some farmland, things like that. But directly from her room, because she was on the 2nd story, she had a window and she could see out into the back of the woods. Just a few feet into the woods, there was an old shed, and she could see the shed from her bedroom window. She said the shed always kind of creeped her out a little bit because it was old, it was back in the woods, and just gave her weird feelings. But she noticed almost every evening her dad would go out into the shed. Sometimes he would only be out there for a few minutes, and then sometimes he would be in this shed for like hours and had no idea what he was doing. She said occasionally she would look out her window and would see lights on in the shed, and so she knew her dad was in there. One morning she looked out her window and there was a big padlock that had been added on to the shed. She thought this was really odd, so she asked her dad about it, and her dad basically told her and her sister that he put the padlock on there to keep people from breaking in because he had some tools that were stolen out of the shed. Then as he was going to leave, he looked back at her and her sister and was like, yeah, I don't ever want you all going near that shed. They're like, why? What's up with the shed? And he was like, don't ask questions. I'm your dad. Just listen to me. I don't want you all near the shed. Here's where things get really odd though. She said one evening she saw her dad go down to the shed. That was pretty normal. She goes to bed, but in the middle of the night she wakes up because she hears her mom screaming her dad's name. She wakes up and she's like, Mom, what is going on? And she's like, I can't find your dad. He never came back from the shed. Mom was like, I'm gonna go check the shed. You girls just stay in here and I will be right back. Within just a matter of minutes, her mom comes running back through the door and calls an ambulance because she had found her husband slumped over in the shed. While they're waiting on the ambulance, all three of them run out to the shed and they're with the dad while he is just like slumped over. He is alive, but he's just not acting right. The ambulance gets there and they say only one person can ride in the ambulance with the dad. So the wife went and she told the daughters just to wait at the house and to take the day off school. Guys, this is so weird. After they leave to go to the hospital, the two girls stay and they're like looking in the shed and there's nothing in there. You know how she said she always saw a light on in the shed? There was no electricity in the shed. There was no lanterns, no electricity. It said hanging on the walls, there was like bird feathers and some rabbit feet. And there was like a small work desk with a few carving knives and a notebook. She said when she opened up the notebook, she saw her father's handwriting in there, but then on other pages, the handwriting was completely different. And it was all just like mumbled jargon that she couldn't understand. And then written in the floorboards were like carvings of different symbols. Some of them looked very fresh. Some of them looked super, super old. Her and her sister were super freaked out, felt very unsettled, and just went back into the house. Her dad was eventually discharged from the hospital and was diagnosed with having a stroke. So he came home, he had to walk with a cane, but ultimately was okay. She told her mom about what she found in the shed, so the mom confronted the dad. Apparently the dad just wouldn't talk about it. He just shut down, would not talk about what was in the shed. She said she started to hear her parents fighting a lot, like late at night. The one thing that her dad was always adamant about was that he wanted to continue to go down to the shed, even with his cane, even with like his disability from having the stroke. He was like adamant in the evenings that he still wanted to go out to the shed. And that was the main source of arguments from her parents. Okay, but then it gets even more bizarre. Eventually, months and months and months later, her dad got pneumonia. He was already declining from his stroke. He ended up passing away. After her dad's passing, Katie, her mom, and her sister ended up moving to a smaller home in the city, but she always wondered about that shed, like she couldn't stop thinking about it. Katie and her sister decided to do some research on the home. Turns out this home had had multiple owners over the last 20 years. Like almost every year, the house was put up for sale and bought by someone else. She tried to contact a couple of the previous owners just to like get more information about why they sold the home, anything odd that happened, whatever. And nobody would talk to her. Everyone, as soon as she started asking, just shut down and refused to speak to her. Except for one woman who said that her husband had also suffered a stroke in the shed. She said to this day she has not returned to the property. She does not intend to, but she knows that there is something evil inside of that shed. What do you all think happened here? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you want more spooky stories, then just follow along.
Hi, I guess I will start this off by saying my name is Delaney. Hi Delaney, and thank you for sending in your submission. I appreciate you, mucho grande. I started watching your videos a little while ago and I thought I would share my story with you. The main part of this story will take place in 2019, rural Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains. Oh my god, girl, we're starting off strong. Oh shit, we got the Appalachian Mountains. I will take you back a little bit. I have always been able to see things since I was a kid. I have been able to dream about something or someone and it would always come true in the coming days. I started having sleep paralysis at about 10 years old. I would have this feeling as if a snake was crawling in my bed and trying to wrap itself around me. Bye! No. Delaney, no. Absolutely not. Not me, not this girl, nope. I have seen doors open and close. I have seen entities, but I will get into the story. My family is me, my mom, my stepdad, my little brother, and my stepsister. It all started when one day I was hiking in the woods on my grandparents' land in rural Kentucky. I was alone. It was just me and the 4 dogs. Oh, I love that you have 4 dogs. This was not a marked trail, this purely forest, just everywhere. In this day, I decided to walk further than normal. As I am walking, I come across a rundown wood barn. I have never been back this far, but I didn't think much of it. That was till I heard my grandmother calling for me from the barn. I knew I had gone out of earshot of my grandma, so I was confused, but I decided at 12 years old, alone, to investigate. Keep in mind, I have the dogs with me. They all seemed to be looking around a lot. I started walking towards the barn. There was no path leading to the barn, so I pushed through thorn bushes and trees. I could still hear my grandmother calling me. As I get closer, it started to sound less like her. I couldn't understand why. I get to the corner of the barn and I start hearing one of the beams in the barn moving. I go to peek into the big open barn, and as I look up, there's a creature. I'm not sure how to describe it. It looked like shadows all over its body. It was howling up but it truly wasn't howling. That thing was mimicking my grandmother. I freeze in that moment, till the dogs start barking and growling at this thing. Then I take off running to the house. I could hear this thing running behind me. I didn't stop running until I got to my grandma's house. I slammed the front door, and it felt as though it hit the door as I closed it. I never told anyone what happened, as I grew up in a religious family that believed it was just mental health issues. I can explain more if you would like. I have a lot more stories about this thing being attached to my life. I will include here what happened. I stopped going into my grandparents as much because a rift between me and my grandmother and my mom. We lived on the same road as my grandparents. I live in the open basement of our family's house, as it's only had 3 bedrooms. I was homeschooled at the time, and both my parents and stepsister worked a lot, so a lot of the time during the day it would just be me at home, and my little brother would go to school. On a few different occasions, I would be sitting on my bed in the basement doing homework and listening to music when I would hear footsteps above me, but no one was home. This happened many times, a lot of times I just couldn't ignore. Until one day it sounded like people were talking upstairs when I was home alone. So I went upstairs to see there was nothing there, when all of a sudden a big thump came from the attic. The noise shook the entire house. Keep in mind, before we moved in, the attic had been nailed closed. I called Mom, and she said it was mostly an animal and she would be home in a little bit. So I went back downstairs. But that night I was laying in bed. My bed was in the far right corner of the basement. The stairs were right in the middle of the basement. There was a walkout down on the far left side of the basement. I had a dog at the time. She would sleep on my bed most nights, but this night she was growling at the basement door going outside. I went to sit up and call her back to the bed when I saw a tall, skinny shadow man start opening the locked door. I screamed at my mom, came running downstairs. I told her what happened. She went to look and saw the door was open a little bit. She said maybe I left it open earlier, but nobody used that door. I tried to explain to her. She didn't want to hear it, so she told me to go back to sleep. I tried to, but every time I would open my eyes, the shadow man would get closer to my bed. The shadow man would sit in a corner in the bed every night, to the point where I stopped caring. I started thinking I was just going crazy, till my little brother had a similar thing happen when he was 8 years old at the time. He slept with his door open at night. It was about 2 a.m. when I heard my brother scream out. Everyone got up to see what was wrong. I asked him recently to describe it to me. He's 15 now. He said he heard the basement door open. That's what woke him up, because it squeaked so loudly. He heard footsteps coming closer and stopping outside his door, and he sat up and saw the tall shadow man standing in the doorway of his bedroom. Things in that house kept getting worse. We ended up moving out after living there for 3 years. I now live on my own, far away from there, and I stage my home regularly, and I have not had anything happen since I moved away. For some background information on the land my grandparents lived in, I found out later on a woman had been unalived by her husband in those woods. I have no idea if it has a link to the story, so advice on what it was would be appreciated. Thank you for sending in this story. First and foremost, I know a lot of people are going to comment and say this was a skinwalker. I do not think this was a skinwalker. I think that something has attached itself to you, and I'm not sure why. I feel like it's attached itself to you and your family. I don't think that it is just specifically you. And I feel like, yeah, it could have started at your grandmother's house. 100%. I don't want to invalidate anything that you have expressed to me. However, I do feel like this started way earlier on than your grandmother's house. I feel like this started with the house that you lived in. So I would be very curious to know when these things started to happen from the beginning. Has it been your whole life? Or specifically for the shadow man? Or was it when you moved into this home? Because I really feel like whatever it is latched itself onto you and your family and is moving with you wherever you go. Now, the fact that you parted from your family might be why you have not seen it again, along with the sage, which I also think was a very good idea. Again, I don't think this was a skinwalker. I think, if anything, this is some sort of demonic presence. The tall blackness, silhouette situation, the fact that it went after you and your little brother. I mean, there's possibility that your other family members have also experienced something like this, and maybe that's why Mom was like, I don't want to hear any of it, because you're going to feed into it. Do you know what I mean? Parents have a very good ability to try to ensure their kids' safety by withholding information. Not necessarily lying, but doing whatever they can to not ensue panic in however you're living. And since this was your bedroom, this was your private space, I really feel like your mom might have just been protecting you so that you didn't feed into this energy.
Well, Davister, you heard correct. I grew up in the Appalachia for the first 21 years of my life, and it's Appalachia Mountains, not Appalachia. If you're from there, you know, don't fight me on this. And also, if you're from Appalachia, you know the rules. You shut your curtains at night, you lock your doors, you lock your windows, you never go out in the woods alone. You use a buddy system, and if you think you heard something, no you didn't. There's one particular time growing up, I did not follow these rules, and what happened to me still bothers me to this day. I used to ride horses, and me and my friends would go trail riding a lot. This particular day, it was just me and one other friend. We went out into the woods around sunset, and this was a pretty big property with lots of like trees. There were some open field streams, things like that. And we knew the trail pretty well. So this particular day, I don't know what got into us, but we decided we were going to play a game of hide and seek on horseback. I told her that I would hide first, so I went up the trail a little ways and then cut off over this like stream back into this more remote area of the woods. There was this old rundown cabin that I decided to hide behind, and my horse was very docile, like very gentle. Nothing ever spooked him, but as I was hiding there, he became extremely restless. This again was not at all in my horse's nature, so I started to feel like really uneasy, like what is going on. I decided I was just going to take him back down to the trail and just go try to find my friend so that we could get back to the barn. My horse would not budge, refused to go back down that trail. I finally got off my horse because I was like, well, maybe if I just lead him, he'll follow me back down. And this is the part that still terrifies me, but at that moment, everything got really, really quiet, including my horse. And I heard my friend say, "Hey, Sydney." I was like, oh my God, thank God she's found me. I'm like, hey girl, I'm over here. But I couldn't see her. Like, I was like, where are you? Hello? And then I started to hear psst, psst. And then again, Sydney, this way. At this point, y'all, I am in tears. I get back on my horse and sprint back to the barn. By the time I get back to the barn, it's almost dark out, and I see that my friend's horse is in the stall. I'm like, what the heck? Why did she come back and just leave me out there in the woods? I mean, this whole incident was maybe about 30 minutes, so I don't know why she would have just left. I find her in the tack room, and she was like, you were out there for like an hour and a half. It was like, I couldn't find you. I didn't know where you were, so I just came back. I look at the clock, and she was absolutely right. It had been almost 2 hours that I was out there, and it felt like it was only like 20 minutes. I told her what happened to me. We were both just so terrified, like trying in our brains to figure out what that could have been. And to this day, I still have no idea. So, yes, the stories you hear of the Appalachian Mountains are so true. If you have any encounters with this or any experience, or you have any stories to share about the Appalachian Mountains, leave it in the comments because I would love to know your experience.
Tell me a scary story. I'll go first. The story was sent to me by Nicole, who grew up on a farm in Kentucky, which is located in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Growing up, Nicole was raised by her grandparents. She remembers having rules that her mamaw gave to her when they were growing up, but she thought that it was just so like nobody got lost or hurt. Rule number 1, don't go outside alone after dark. Rule number 2, be out of the woods before the sun even starts to set. Rule number 3, never venture into the woods alone, and always make sure you mark your trail to get back out quickly if needed. One rule she never understood was rule number 4. If you hear something you think you shouldn't, ignore it and walk back to the house immediately. Grandma would never call out their names. She would just ring the old dinner bell that was in the yard when it was time for them to come back home. Their little house was tucked in a hollow right in the middle of the property. So the house and the woods surrounding it had been in her grandfather's family since like the late 1800s. Out of 98 acres, only 5 were cleared, which left the rest covered in like a dark shroud of wood. In their town, the woods around their home was known as the Lonesome Wood. Local myth or lore surrounding the set of woods said that if anybody dared enter it alone, they wouldn't come back out. Nicole thought this was funny because she had grew up playing in these woods with her cousins, and they didn't think that it was scary at all. She said they all joked around about it, but none of them ever actually went in alone.
alone. Nicole was never scared of these woods until one day she was home alone because it was fall break and she decided to break rule number 3 and go walk in the woods alone. As she's walking, she hears a whistle, but a whistle like she'd never heard before. She said it like echoed in her head and sent a chill straight down her spine, and something told her that she needed to get out of there now. She turned to walk away when something clear as day said, "Nicole, don't leave yet." Her heart sank, and even though her mama told her to never run, she ran. Ran as fast as she could, and she didn't once look back. As she ran, she could hear something following her, but she could also hear that whistling sound coming from every direction. The last thing she heard was, "Wait, don't go." It all stopped once her feet hit the long gravel driveway that leads to her house. She stopped to catch her breath, and that's when she realized she could feel something watching her. She said it almost felt like something was trying to draw her back in. She shook off the feeling and ran back to her house, hollering for her mama. She told her everything that happened, and she said the fear that she saw on her mama's face was something that she would never forget. Her mama hugged her real tight and told her she wasn't allowed to go back in the woods, and told her no matter what, don't stare into the trees too long or she might see something that she shouldn't. She continued her normal routine every day, walking their half-mile gravel driveway to catch the school bus. Every day when she'd walk back home, she felt like something was watching her. Sometimes she would even hear that same creepy whistle. There were a couple of times when she heard her name being called, but she knew nobody was around. She learned to ignore it the best she could, and as time went on, it lessened. Her feet never left the safety of that gravel ever again. That's what she told herself, at least. She says she doesn't know if she was ever actually truly safe. I can't wait to hear what y'all think about this one. Let me know in the comments. This story reminds me a lot of my own personal experiences here in Appalachia. If you have a paranormal or creepy or unexplainable story you want to share, you can send it to my email address, which is linked in my bio. If you live alone, or if you even just sleep alone at night, you should probably just scroll on past this video. If you choose to stay, don't say I didn't warn ya. This is a story from eastern Kentucky in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I know I've kind of been MIA, but I'm sorry, I'm back. I love y'all. I just needed a little break. If you're wondering what this is behind me, my roof is leaking. It has been raining and flooding like crazy here in Kentucky, so yeah, just try to ignore it. Let's get to the story because it is seriously so creepy. Bailey used to live in rural eastern Kentucky in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. They lived in the middle of the neighborhood with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from or behind them because of the foothills. When she first moved in, her grandma told her she had a set of rules for her to follow. Bailey just chalked these rules up to hillbilly stranger danger. There was things like don't mess with the wild animals, don't go out in the woods alone. And that's where things got a little weird. They started being like, don't whistle. If you hear something weird, no you didn't. If you hear someone call your name, don't answer it and do not go towards the voice. If you see someone in the woods that you think you know, but you know they're nowhere around, no you didn't, and come on home. Dad had mowed a path through the tall grass and berry bushes that was on the left side of their double-wide trailer. They used to camp out there a lot because it was right there, like, you know, in the woods, and it was beautiful, but they could still be close enough to go check on their grandma. Now, when you're out in the woods here, things are a lot louder than you think. Got animal life, bug noises, the wind, the creek. And that night, they added a campfire to the mix because, you know, campfire has its own sounds too. Her dad decided to go back up the path about a quarter of a mile to get more adult beverages and to check on her grandma. It's crazy the things you can't say on this app without getting the video banned. Before her dad left, he had specifically told her not to mess with the fire. While he was gone, things started to get quiet, like real quiet. And that's never a good sign when you're in the woods, especially alone. The wind went still, the animal and the bugs fell completely silent, and the creek sounded like it was miles away. She started getting really uncomfortable even though her dad had left her alone at the camp before like this, and that's when she started to smell and taste it. The taste was in the back of her throat from out of nowhere. It was like this awful metal tang. After a few more moments of dread, her dad finally came back. He was mad because he said that he could smell burning metal while he was coming up the trail, and he accused her of throwing his adult beverage cans into the fire. He told him that she hadn't done that and even pointed to the fire to prove it to him. She just immediately changed the subject and said that there was a storm coming in and they had to get back to the house. So they just left the tent there and they started their way back. Now, the very weird but very cool thing about lightning in woods this dense, like in the middle of the night, is when the lightning hits, it lights up everything like it was the middle of the day. Up until like the front of the trees. You know, the next set of trees back, it's still pitch black. There's no street lights, so unless you have lights on your own personal property, it's just pitch black. It's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there is no light. He's eating watermelon as one does in August
in the mountains when the first clap of lightning hits. Everything's bright as can be, and then after a second passes, it's pitch black again. The next clap of lightning comes, and that's when she kind of sees it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road, just past the first line of trees, she could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark again, and this is also when she starts tasting that awful burning metal taste again in the back of her throat. At this moment, she's not really sure what she just saw, so she kind of just stays still. It's a few moments before the lightning hits again, but when it does, the figure is now closer. It's standing side by side to the trees now, and then it goes pitch black dark again. She said it's been 20 years since this day, and she still has trouble fully describing what she actually saw. The thing's head wasn't proportioned right to its body. Its arms were too long and the torso didn't fit right. Once the lightning hits again and everything's lit up, she can see it standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to wait around and see this thing get any closer, she goes inside. Her grandma's doing the dishes and she asks her why she's inside. She tells her she thinks she just saw something outside. Grandma almost immediately gets her dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. That night, Bailey slept with her grandma. Next day, they discovered the tent's doors had been torn off. Didn't look like an animal had done it because things weren't cut or shredded, but it looked like someone took and pulled it apart. Also, about a mile or so up the road, her uncle had found about 8 chickens out in his yard that had lost their lives. None of them had heads. All of their heads were gone. For the next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. Remembers her dad had to be late to work for about 3 weeks. Any time that she tried to talk about it, he'd just change the subject. She just figured it was because she was a kid and it wasn't important or it wasn't real. It wasn't until years later that she finally understood. When she was in her early 20s, some of her cousins came to town for Halloween. As she was telling her cousin this story, her aunt got irate with her. She said, "Don't be telling them that. Do not put that evil on them." After this, she couldn't help but think back on all the times that she had tried to bring it up and she was shunned. So friends, if you ever find yourself in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Kentucky, don't forget to follow the rules. You can send your scary stories to my email address, which is linked in my bio. As always, I look forward to seeing you in another video. Love y'all.
Today we're going to talk about a horror story that takes place in the Appalachian Mountains, and if you want specifics, it takes place in the state of Tennessee. So this entire family was traveling to the mountains to attend a wedding, and they found a rental that they were going to stay in there. And it was literally in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods, as most of the rentals here are. So the star of this show is the follower who sent in this story that said one night while they were sleeping, they woke up to their cousin and little sister frantically just banging on their door. Of course, they jump up and they open the door, and they're like, there's someone at the window. There's a man. He's knocking and staring into the window. And big sister, kicked into overdrive and went to that window immediately to check and see what it was. There was nothing at the window. But just to be safe, they went and woke up their mom, told them what was going on, and the mom got up and checked it. And during all this chaos of the house being checked, everyone in that rental woke up and started checking. And a few of the guys in the house went and looked around outside, and there was nothing there. So after a little bit, everyone calmed down and returned to their respective bedrooms, and the follower is laying their head down to go back to sleep, and they hear, "Hey." And this was coming directly from their patio door. So they sit straight up in the bed, and they're like, okay, maybe it was just an animal? So they lay back down, gaslighting themselves, saying it was an animal, and they hear, "Hey, hey, hey," repeatedly over and over again, on top of constant tapping. The next day, they got up and were telling some of the other relatives what was going on, and that is where they learned the rules of Appalachia. And they learned that they had broken every single one of them.
Scary story time, Appalachian Mountains, while I try to reactivate the store-bought slime. P.S. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I really been searching up how to pronounce that word. Lighting is trash, but y'all, it's so gooey. Anyways, this story time takes place in the Appalachian Mountains, and it was sent in by a supporter. Now, like always, disclaimer, I can't tell y'all if this is real or not. It was sent in to me. So Layla and her boyfriend decided to rent a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, or at least near it. Get your money's worth and what? Let it drain. She knew little to nothing about the place that she was going because her boyfriend was the one that rented the cabin. Now, where they were going, again, why do people do this? I don't know. They were going in the middle of nowhere with no Wi-Fi, just straight remote. The best way to put it. It was for their anniversary, so she thought it was just a cute little thing. Now, her boyfriend was like, "Have you ever heard the creepy stories about the Appalachian Mountains?" And she was like, man, that ain't real. It ain't real, you know? Layla wasn't the type of person to believe in ghost stories, anything that had to do with spirits or the supernatural. She didn't believe in it. Now, like always, the first couple of nights were fine. They had rented the cabin for a week, and the first 3 nights, there were no issues. Now, the fourth night, that was where the problems came in at. Okay, sorry. Layla woke up at 2:58 in the morning. She heard 2 knocks. She has no idea where they were coming from, but she heard it. Also, following the second knock, I'm getting goosebumps. She heard whistling. Now, if y'all don't know anything about them scary stories about the mountains, don't ever. When it gets night, you're not supposed to be outside. She tried to wake her boyfriend up. His name is Josh, by the way, but he was knocked out cold. So she went to go see who was knocking this late at night when all of a sudden she got goosebumps all over her body. And it was just like something stopping her from going to go check out whatever she heard. Now, she went back to bed. She was completely freaked out, but you know, she brushed it off, as they always do, but she brushed it off. Now, the next night, she heard the same thing. She gets up, she gets goosebumps all over her body, and she gets this urge to lay back down, so that's what she does. But on the, the 6th night at this point, she's like, no, I have to get up. I need to check out what it is. Now, she followed where the knocks were coming from, and they were coming from the window. Now, when she looked out of the window, y'all, it was pitch black. It was just straight woods, and she kept hearing whistling. Oh my gosh, I got goosebumps. Y'all see that? And it was just like something drawing her outside, basically. And then as she went to go close the window, she heard her name from outside, and it was her boyfriend calling her. Oh my God. I'm literally scared right now. I'm not trying to seem like I'm doing too much, but I'm literally by myself right now. So right as she was about to go outside, her boyfriend basically called her back to bed. She went back to bed. She brushes this off, y'all. She brushes this off. I don't know why she would when her boyfriend is in bed, but he's calling her from outside. But she doesn't believe in, supernatural. I'm stuttering, but whatever. The next night, okay, her boyfriend is up this night. He hears the knocks, and he's like, are these the knocks that you've been hearing? And she was like, yeah, but I don't think it's anything. It's probably old pipes or, a cat. I don't know why people who don't believe in ghosts just make up the most craziest things, but yeah. That's what she told him. He was like, girl, no. Do you know where we are? Now, y'all, the knocks are driving her completely crazy. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And she's like, I have to investigate. I can't take this anymore. Now, she gets out of bed. Her boyfriend is not all the way asleep. He's half asleep. So right as she's about to open the window, y'all, she sees a man, just straight in the distance, a man. And she gets spooked out by this, obviously. And the man is calling her name in a familiar voice. And it's drawing her in, and it starts whistling. Now, she about to walk to the front door to go investigate, because she over here in her head, she literally writes and says, I thought that he needed help. Honey, no. Right as she was about to open the door, her boyfriend stops her and goes, so what are you doing? And she's like, there's a man outside. He was calling my name. He was whistling he needs my help. He was probably whistling to get my attention for help, or our attention for help. And her boyfriend is looking at her like she's crazy, and he's like, that's it, we're going home. And she's like, what's wrong? What's your issue? He was like, no, we're going home. So they wait till the next day, obviously morning. They get in the car, they drive home. They didn't even finish their stay, y'all. She's like, why are you acting like this? You literally made us pack up all our bags in the middle of the night. We're leaving today. We didn't even get to finish our stay. What's going on with you? And he tells her, you've never heard any of the tales of the Appalachian Mountains. You think things are supernatural isn't real, but there's some places that you just don't mess with for real. And she's like, bro, I told you, none of that stuff is real. And he goes on to tell her, if you were outside, you would no longer be here. And she's talking about what are you talking about? He says that man wasn't a real person. That was a hallucination. Because keep in mind, he was hearing it, but he knew to ignore it because he knew the stories. He kind of knew the area. Why would he bring his girlfriend who doesn't believe in supernatural in a place like this? I have no idea. But this kind of freaks her out a little bit because now that she thinks about it, it was literally driving her mad. It was drawing her to the freaking window, drawing her to the door. And right as she's about to open the door to go outside, it was just everything was quiet. There was no bugs, there was nothing, no noise. And so ever since that day, she's believed in supernatural a tiny bit. Again, y'all, I can't tell y'all if these stories are real. They were sent into me. You could probably find these stories on the internet somewhere. I have no idea. Stop trying to clock me for saying, oh, I've heard this story before. It was sent into me, okay? Oh, okay, bye.